Good afternoon, friends. This is our October edition of Afternoons with an Author. And I'm very delighted that today we're going to be talking about Bollywood. And we have with us two very distinguished persons from Bollywood. We have Balaji Vittal, whose book, Pure Evil, and many other books that he's written are going to be discussed today. And we have with us one of the finest critics and one of the finest observers of Indian cinema, Ms. Bhawana Somaaya, with us today. We are very glad that you've both accepted our invite to join us. Friends, before we kick off the session today, let me just say that, Bollywood's impact on everybody in Bharat, Hindustan, India is phenomenal impact. Balaji's written a series of books, so has Bhavanaji written a series of books. So I think we had put the book Pure Evil on the cover of this invite today. But this is also the time to celebrate and recognize Sachin Dev Burman and his son R.D. Burman. Sachin Da's birthday, of course, is on the 31st of October. So maybe we could start with Pure Genius and then move on to Pure Evil. So maybe I'll request Balaji to first give us something about the Burmans. Then we'll ask Bhavanaji about how the transition has been taking place in the Indian film industry over these years. And then as we go along with the conversation, will take its own time.
Thank you, Dr. Chopra. Thank you so much for inviting me. And thank you, Bhavanaji, for making it despite your heavy schedule. Really, really appreciate your time. Yes, this afternoon we'll talk about Bollywood cinema in general. And as you correctly said, what better person than Bhavanaji to sort of give us her deep insights based on the number of books that she has written. Well, what I have written is nothing even close in comparison to what she has written in terms of sheer volume or sheer value she writes. But yes, 31st October happens to be the anniversary of the passing of Burman Dada, S.D. Burman. And I would say I was fortunate enough to have been given the opportunity to co-author a book with Anirudh Bhattacharjee on S.D. Burman. And of course, there's a transition that happened. The long lineage of the Burmans, which began centuries ago, and then came down to Burman Dada and then his son R.D. Burman. So I have been privileged to do some research. But of course, I'll turn it to Bhavanaji. Bhavanaji, there has been Burman Dada, then there was R.D. Burman, two very different personalities, yet with a very strong underlying commonality. And your views in terms of how the Burman and Burman shaped Bollywood music, say from 1950s till today. They continue to impress us. They continue to.
Sorry, I lost you. I could not hear you.
Yeah, what I was saying is, in your view, the Burman and Burman, say from 1950 till today, how has the transition happened and how they have continued to influence music as they continue to do today? Your views, given that it is Burman Dada's anniversary of passing coming up day after tomorrow on 31st.
I have not written so much about music as you have written, but even then, as an audience, whatever one was exposed to S.D. Burman to begin with was definitely different and a new sound and a new voice that we got introduced to. And immediately we fell in love with his music, partly because of the filmmakers he worked with and partly because also of the actors. But of course, the music was his soul. And I'm told that little R.D. Burman was always around him and always punching the harmonium. And that's why the name Pancham also came about, because they said, "Panchwa Sur lagata tha." And they, like you rightly said, they had a lot of commonality and yet they were very different. In fact, the Rajesh Khanna film after Aradhana, the one which he did with Shaktida, what was it?
Kati Patang.
No, not Kati Patang. Sharmila Tagore and Rajesh Khanna. Chingari Koi Barse.
Amar Prem.
So in fact, there was a lot of debate that maybe R.D. Burman gave that music and not S.D. So, R.D. had the magical quality to give music like S.D. and also to give like him.
Yes.
And R.D. was ahead of his time and was not just a great musician and gave us a variety of films, but also somebody who nurtured relationships with the lyricists, with the actors, and was truly loved by all his colleagues and peers. So
Exactly.
I think it's because of all those path-breaking songs that he continues to be an inspiration for the generations to come, and particularly because I'm associated with the radio. Every time there is an R.D. Burman anniversary coming, the radio channels go completely mad. And while other film composers and lyricists get a day, R.D. Burman always gets a week of celebration on the radio channels because
Yeah.
you can't do justice to him in a day.
Correct. Absolutely correct.
In fact, if I could just step in, you just mentioned about your involvement with radio. You've been involved with everything. You've been involved with the radio, with web, with print, and TV. So how do you compare the appreciation or the critique of Bollywood in these four very different mediums?
I will say that writing a review for the print is the easiest because it's text and it's in my control. It is also the most intimate because even though I know how much word count I have, I can still juggle and balance what I want to say. The radio is the toughest because while print we go either by a daily, a weekly, or a monthly, in the radio it is by the seconds. Everything is measured by the seconds. And I get 3 minutes for a review today. In that, the first minute is in introducing me and the channel and the music of the channel that they play. And in the end also again that Dhun Badal Ke To Dekho comes. Now I get, that means 2 minutes in which I have to give the credits, cast, story, performances, and they are showing the visuals of it in the one which goes on the video, which is on the social media. But you get used to it. I think journalists are like donkeys, whatever they are exposed to, they get used to it. We are champions of.
I'm not very sure whether the journalists will be happy to hear this, but anyway, it's a very apt comment.
I think I will have to immediately correct it because I don't want to get into trouble anywhere. So I will say that we are like, I feel we are like, वो गाना गाता है अमिताभ बच्चन, सारी दुनिया का बोझ हम उठाते हैं और सब कुछ बोझ उठा के जो चलता है.
This is better. बोझ उठाना, so you can be coolie number one.
Luggage है, उसको foreign, that baggage has to be reduced from my shoulder to the destination. कुछ भी करो, just deliver and get over with it.
Great.
Correct.
Great.
Absolutely.
So I think Balaji, tell us about how you wrote, both the story of both the Burmans. Everyone, we are aware about the connection with the Tripura royal family, the move from Komala to, Agartala to Komala to Dhaka, and then Calcutta. So maybe you can give our readers a little bit of a background to the Burman family, because his birthday, his anniversary is around the corner, and then we can move on to Pure Evil and other things.
Yeah. I'll cover the Burmans very briefly because, as Bhavna ji said, the main thing we would like to discuss is Pure Evil, as you said. Both Anirudh Bhattacharya and I have been ardent fans of both the Burmans, right from our college days in Jadavpur University. We have known each other since then. When I was in undergraduate and he was in post-graduation, we happened to share the same birthday, but a few years apart. He's obviously senior to me. Now, we used to do college quiz Antakshari together and attend, college fest and quizzes, music quizzes. So we really, sort of hit off well. And this thing about getting into trivia, finding about the backstories and all, that was there in our college campus quiz and all that. After we graduated, obviously, both of us got into corporate jobs and all that. And he started writing a couple of chapters on R.D. Burman because he had in his mind to write a book on it. So, and then it didn't happen because he got busy with his corporate job and I got busy with mine. And 2008, in a chance conversation, it came up saying that he said, I'm planning to write a book on R.D. Burman. I said, I'll join you. So that's how the journey resumed again. The first 1.5 chapters, which was in draft mode, we started picking that up. And I started traveling to Bombay. He started interviewing the people who were in Calcutta because by that time I had moved to Hyderabad. So that's how the whole journey was. I used to travel to Bombay every month and meet people and many of the musicians. Unfortunately, we have lost some of them in the last 13, 14 years. but it was a fun journey writing about it. And R.D. Burman, writing R.D. Burman's are a tad easier because a lot of people were there who were very enthusiastic. They're former musicians who are willing to give us time. And in fact, I traveled to Chennai, I met S.P. Balasubramaniam. So that was easier. And fortunately, the book came out well. We found a very good publisher in Harper Collins. They were extremely supportive. I mean, we, of course, initially when we approached publishers, we couldn't find any because they said, who knows you? I mean, we don't know you. But Harper Collins was who opened the door for us. And I'll be always eternally grateful to them. So then S.T. Burman was far more difficult to write. And I can say that Anirudh did a bulk of the weightlifting. He traveled to Komila, he traveled to Tripura, he traveled, I don't know where, I don't know how he found out that, the postmaster who was there in that place and he met them. So it was far, far more difficult book to write because already many years had passed. So yes, both were very gratifying experiences, and Anirudh and I both are glad that people liked it. And R.D. Burman book won the national award as well. So yeah, I think the journey started there.
I mean, we are actually in the midst of great award winners. I must share with the listeners that Bhavana ji is a Padma Shri. She was given the Padma Shri for a series of works on books and on her critique. So now let's talk about Pure Evil. Maybe I'll request Bhavana ji to talk about how the Indian the Bollywood has having heroes on one side, villains on one side. To some, that also comes out in your study of the women in Bollywood. But first, let's talk about these pure evil men of Bollywood, because how can something be pure evil and how can something be pure heroism? Somewhere in between. I think all of us come somewhere in between. So maybe your first comments on pure evil, and why don't you grill him on what pure evil is about? Could it have been written differently? Could it have been better? What else could he have done? So let's call him up.
So first, before talking about the book, I want to say that when I became a journalist, I was in the first year of my college, and my mother put a condition that even if you go to interview anybody, you will not interview the villains of the Bollywood, because she said, I don't want you to meet Ranjit, and I don't want you to meet Amzad Khan, and I don't want you to meet Praan. And she was really very petrified of all these villains. But I have to say that from the 78, when I started, I met all the villains, and they are wonderful people. And my mother didn't have to worry at all. And they were just wonderful, full of insights, extremely observant, sensitive. So what they do on screen has nothing to do with their persona. About the book, I want to say that it's one of the finest books I have read on the villains. And there have been plenty of books on the villains and their journeys on the screen. There have been plenty of essays, analysis on the bad men. There has been a book on the bad man himself, that is Gulshan Grover, where he talks extensively about playing villains in all films and how he would make it different. Or even Praan Saab's biography, I have read that how he would work on the characterization. But Balaji's book is superbly researched and very diligently written. His classification of the chapters, how he classifies all of them, he not just goes in a chronological order, but also in the degrees of evil. Matlab, I know that there was heroism had plus and A plus, but I had never thought about the evil having so many degrees. There are those the honey trap women. Then there are the dacoits. There are the dons. There are the mental health villains who are dealing with schizophrenia and everything. I really think you really take a bow. It was a fabulous read, and frankly, I have nothing to criticize in the book. I can only shower you with praises, and I have been thinking that how did you go about it? I'm curious about the process, because you've not left out anybody. So what was your process? What was the way you were making your folders? Who was assisting you? How were you making sure that the guys and the girls and the fathers and the mothers were not left out in this large A to Z list?
Yeah. Madam, first of all, many, many, many thanks for your kind words. Coming from you, it feels great. I mean, I'm really old. I don't know. I'm at a loss for words right now. Someone whom I respect so much, is praising my book. I think it's a great day for me. It's a great moment for me. Well, it was a very tough book to write. And let me be honest, first 2 years, I mean, this contract came when it was in 2010 or 2011 itself. And for the first 2-3 years, I was floundering around. I didn't know what to write because what I was doing is I just went and I made a list of all the villain actors and I made a list of all their movies and I went and started interviewing them. That is one part of it, which can buffet to the story, which can add to the story. But it can't be a story in itself, right? Just the plain interview transcripts, one after the other, it can't be a story in itself. I was trying to find out what is a story to write. Then I got a couple of directions from one is, of course, Kaushik Bhaumik, who's a film expert. Many of us would know him. Kaushik Bhaumik gave me a bit of idea. He's saying, Balaji, first apply your engineering brain. Do a sort of a categorization, unpack the box of villainy and do a categorization. Okay, go find in that and plot it. Try to see if you can plot it by decade, but don't restrict yourself to decade. Go by the genre and the classification. He gave me that. Second thing, one of my old friends from Jalapur University, he said, look, try and write a synopsis of a chapter in just 5 or 6 lines. What is it you want to say? Because you have so many things to do, you're getting lost in between that. Clear all the clutter and write down in 5 to 6. His name is Professor Amitabh Chatterjee. He said, just write in 5, 6 lines. What is it you want to say? You're only telling me what Shyam Benegal told you. You're telling me what KK Menon told you. You're telling me what Ranjit told you. But what is it you are trying to say? I'm not getting that in the manuscript. So fine. It took me till about 2015 for the first 2-3 years to get a basic hang of the story. And of course, many friends were there who kept encouraging me all through. And Anirudh Bhattacharjee had done some very useful interviews with Dulal Guho's son, who made Do Anjane and all that. So obviously, we still continue to work together, though I was solo authoring this book. But as always, Anirudh and I always continue to work together on this. And he contributed lot of nuggets with some interviews that he had conducted. So he shared those with me. So once the structure was clear, then the details started coming in. Then it was easier for me to flesh out the whole thing. And I got a lot of great, fantastic editorial support from Nindita Banerjee from Harper Collins, because she said, Balaji, you're trying to cover a lot of films, but somewhere it's skimming over the surface. Right now, you're telling me, for example, Diwar mein Amitabh Bachchan anti-hero, and you're moving on. No, go deeper, because people don't expect people to remember what exactly was the villainy or the anti-heroism about. Right. So that way, then I cut down the number of films and went deeper into those. So, Bhavna ji and sir, it's like this. To step back into the broader context, in the world that we live in, okay, there is a villain of the individual, there is a villain of the society, there is a villain of the nation. Right. So all the villains.
Very nice, very nicely put. I think it's a very, very neat classification. The villain as an individual, the villain as a person whom the society regards as a villain, and the villain from the point of view of the nation. And there, I think you did a great job. Sorry, just give me half a second. All right, go on.
There is a villain in the family also. There's family villain.
Yeah, family villain. Yes.
Yeah, family villain.
The Balaji, just before the chain breaks, the way he has brought it, from the times of the empire, from the times of how the Angrez was the villain, So when you read about villains, I mean, for instance, today nobody will be able to relate to Shole's, Daku Gabbar Singh, because we don't have Gabbar Singhs now. I mean, we have different kinds of villainy, different kinds of things. So I think great job, because it also gives you a perspective of Indian history. It also gives you a perspective of how India has evolved, how Bharat has evolved, how we are looking at ourselves, how we're looking at society. Sorry to have broken your chain of...
No, that's fine. Yeah, madam, you were saying something.
No. Go ahead.
So actually, if you look at it, Pure Evil tries to mirror the changing face of the Indian history. Okay, the India socio-economic history. And here, let me step away from Pure Evil, the book, for a few minutes. Okay. And Madam, maybe I can hand it over to you, saying that look at how the antagonist of the individual, of the family, of the society, and the nation have evolved over period. For example, Keshav Mahindra made a statement in the 60s or later. He made a statement saying that after the British Raj came the license Raj, right? When import duties are very high, and that's when smuggling started taking place in India. Now, this had Balaji Vittal maybe wasn't even born those days, but the fact is, today you're able to link it to saying that why did smuggling start then, and how did it come into movies? Regardless of whether anyone writes a book of that or not, in the broader Bollywood context, it sort of mirrors all through. It has mirrored what has happened in the society. For example, in the 1980s, if anyone wanted to make a film, all they had to do was pick up the newspaper in the morning. यहाँ पे shoot out, वहाँ पे hospital में shoot out. This भाई ने उस भाई के आदमी को मार दिया. इसने इसका गला काट दिया. In the courtroom में shooting हो रहा है. Because Bombay was a free for all those days. It was what happened in Chicago in the 1930s, right? Even police is helpless. And when the police is let loose, then it's even worse, because when the police says that now we'll take control of the whole thing. So that was happening in 80s. So that's how you have people like Rama Shetty coming in Ardh Satya or Anna. Now, in the 70s, if you look at it, the villain was a very suave sort of a hotelier, like someone played by Ajit, who speaks, Mohatrama, बैठिए, आपको तकलीफ हो इसके लिए माफी चाहते हैं, right? He speaks in a very suave manner. But look at the 80s. There is the local flavored bhai, kya bolta rahe, goli maar de rahe, right? He speaks in a Marathi flavored Hindi, or he's a South Indian by origin. Why? Because that's exactly what was happening out there. So pretty much, in my opinion, the way I did it during my research is that cinema has mirrored what has been happening around us. Usse alag nahi ho sakta, uske saath hi chalega. That was the core of writing this book. Why did China come in as a villain in 1964? They didn't come in as a villain in 1958, because something happened in 1962 in the world that we live in.
Absolutely.
That had trigger points. Even if you look at foreigner villainy, it has changed. In the 90s, late 90s and early 2000s, we had films like Kargil, LOC Kargil, this Kargil, Lakshya and all that. But then that changed to not the Pakistan as a country becoming the villain, but ISI becoming the villain. If you look at Hero, which was Priyanka Chopra's first film, it was ISI as a named villain in all these films. Why? Because that was reality. That's what was happening.
Great.
So that's where I went by. Madam, your views on this mirroring, or the cinema mirroring the society?
It's a debate that's been going on forever. That do movies reflect society, or does society reflect movies? I think there cannot be an absolute answer, but I do think that the movies reflect society, because agar hum purani filmein dekhe, when we were under the British Raj, all the movies were talking about desh ke liye kuch kare. All movies were patriotic. All movies were talking about rising to our aspirations and fighting the common villain. Later on, when we got the independence, the freedom, but we were struggling with so many problems: migration, unemployment, all that. And again, that was reflecting in Bhoomika Zameen or any of Bimal Roy films. In the 60s, when Shami Kapoor glides down the hill and says Yahoo, it is not just Shami Kapoor, it is India that is celebrating a new decade, the color in cinema, the happiness, finding our roots. In the 70s, when Amitabh Bachchan comes, and we are again dealing with recession, unemployment, anger against the establishment, the anger is not just Bachchan, it is the anger of the entire society against the establishment. And in the 80s, when we were having, it was a very dark phase. We were only seeing smuggler movies. The theatre conditions were very bad. People had stopped going to the cinema halls, families, good families. Girls were not allowed to go without a male companion to the cinema halls. It is because probably the underworld had taken over the grip in the film fraternity and making the kind of movie they wanted or they were funding. And in the 90s, again came romance with Shah Rukh Khan, and people were falling in love. 2000, again, Amitabh Bachchan was doing Kaun Banega Crorepati and also Mohabbatein. He had crossed the border from being the protagonist to the character actor. And the character actor became so sexy and attractive because it was Mr. Bachchan playing it.
Yeah.
So eventually, what happens is when we give them the kind of movies, very often the filmmakers say that we are making the kind of movies that the audience wants to see. The audience says we are forced to watch the films that they are giving. Okay, it's like when I go to a sari shop to buy a sari, I don't know which sari I'm going to buy. The shopkeeper has to show me many fabrics and many colors and many permutation combinations, and I am the queen who will decide which sari I will buy. So
Exactly.
filmmakers make many, many movies, and I am the audience, Janta Janardhan, who will go to the theater and decide कि ये film box office
I
पे
like
hit
it, yeah. I have a question for
Exactly.
both of you. You see, and that question is that, uh, most of the books that have been written, whether it's on Amitabh Bachchan or Hema Malini or Rekha or you've written Pure Evil, you've written all of them, or at least the ones that I am aware of, all of them are written in English. Aren't there any good books on Hindi cinema being written in Hindi? I mean, I do know that there was a book on Mughal-e-Azam which was written 2 years ago. But why is it that a lot of writing on Hindi cinema is in English stroke English?
No, you're
It's not
wrong. You're
okay.
wrong. There are many, many, many very good books written by our Hindi authors, also
Okay.
Marathi authors. In fact, when I was on the book National Award jury, we gave to Lata Mangeshkar anthology. If I can find the book, I will show it. And I can't remember the author's name offhand, but he's the prince. He's a prince. He's not a ordinary mortal like us. And very, very good books are written by other languages.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's very good information for me because we get so caught up in this world of Harper Collins and Penguin and
We are restricted to
okay, or
English.
not you. All right, let's
Yeah.
let's go with it. Okay, so Balaji, we've just had a discussion on the evolution of Hindi cinema. Let's move on to the Hindi songs because you have this lovely 50 songs which you talk about. Gaata Rahe Mera Dil. It must have been very difficult to select 50 songs, especially for a person who's a hardcore antaksharist, as I would put it. So how would you come up with these 50 songs? And whether Bhavna ji would agree with this selection of 50 songs, or would she have another set of songs which are her favorite? This is what I like to engage with both of you in the next few minutes. Uh, First, to you, Balaji. Sorry.
I have not read the Gaata Rahe Mera Dil,
Okay.
but the songs like movies are always subjective. I can like a song because I like the raga. I can like the song because of the situation. I can like the song because of the singer or the actor who performed. So I don't think anybody can agree with anybody's list of 50 songs.
Okay, so let's hear Balaji's list, and then maybe you can
Yeah.
comment on his list.
No, madam, you're absolutely right. And Dr. Chopra, it's a very pertinent question that you ask. How did we select the list? We had to take off the R.D. Burman hat because we were just fresh out of having published the R.D. Burman book. So we had to take off that hat. That was very important. Second is we had to give it very objective. So we said, okay, what is the start point and the end point? We said we have to give 20 years for a song to become a classic. I mean, it can't be a recent release because a recent release will always sound good. So we said we'll take a cutoff at 1994, right? Say from 1936 till 1994. Okay, which were the songs that came out? Because this book, we completed the manuscript in 2014. So give it 20 years. So 1994 will be the cutoff. Let's go. It has to have a fair coverage of the decades, the genre, the composers, the lyricists, the actors, the filmmakers. It has to have a fair representation without being a quota system.
Mhm.
Okay. If there is an exceptional song, we will include it. But ऐसी कोई बात नहीं कि I have to include one of every composer. And then we said that let it be objective, but let's bring a little bit of our own sauce, because anyway, people are not going to agree with our list. So we in Awara, for example, we said instead of Awara Hu, which is a very popular song, let's look at the medley song in Awara. Because what a beautiful picturization. It was way ahead of its time in the newly built RK studios. Right. It was amazing. So that took the cake. We said, we'll put that. Okay. Then coming to Rafi Saab ke to bahut sare gaane achhe hain. Then they said, let's go a little bit offbeat and select Jag Dile Diwana from Unche Log, music by Chitragupt. Because for people who have not heard the song, they must. It's a dreamlike sequence. It's brilliant. It's a brilliant song in our opinion. People could disagree with that. So we said no one is going to agree with it. So the algorithm fairly was able to cover all this. And once we selected about 100 songs, it's a long list of 100. And from there, we came down to 75, which was very difficult. Then we came down to 60, which was extremely tough. And then it was impossible. We can't. Then we went back to Harper Collins and said, can we keep it top 60? They said, no, it has to be 50 or nothing. Okay, so then we said, let's look at songs which cover more than one person. We realized that we had not covered Amitabh Bachchan at all anywhere in the list. So we said, let's take the Silsila song. Okay, which is written by Javed Akhtar Saab and Amitabh Bachchan is featured in that. So we said, we'll take that song. Ye Kahan Aa Gaye Hum. And it's a beautiful number. So that we are able to cover two people in one song. And then at the end of it, we say, okay, somewhere this is 51. But then we said, we'll put a prelude song, which is a tribute to KL Saigal. Okay, he's saying, we say that he's the master of everyone. Sabka Bhagwan, Bhagwan ka Bhagwan wo hai. So we'll put a tribute song. And then we'll say that the 51st song, which is a non-film song, which is a Sri Ramchandra song, Ae Mere Badan Ke Logon. So that we were able to cover. Of course, it was with a lot of heartbreak that we had to leave out a few songs. We could not cover Aapki Yaad Aati Rahi Raat Bhar by Chaya Ganguly in a Gaman. It is a lovely song, beautiful song, but unfortunately we could not cover it. So, and then we said, what do we write? It's a beautiful song, beautiful, that everybody knows. So then we said, let's book out the backstory. So we started interviewing people. And so every song is a story. So it's a book of 50 short stories. That's how we did it.
What a lovely way to describe it. Bhavna ji, would you like to talk about this particular way of looking at selecting the best songs, and would you like to share some of your most favorite songs over the last so many years, especially after 2014, because his work ends in 2014?
I think I cannot remember any song offhand like that. And if ever, I always, when I finish writing a story or a deadline assignment, the minute I shut the computer, I start singing. But I'm never singing the new song. It's always an old song. And there are so many numbers that come out these days which seem familiar, but I can never remember the reference to context, which hero, what, nothing. So I'm completely blank on this.
Yeah.
I am actually thinking about the word engineering that Kaushik used. And, I think all writing, whether it's a book or it is our daily assignments, it's all about first mathematics and then about content. Because we also become like tailors. They say, earlier it used to be 1,000 words, 1,500 words. Then it became 500 words. Nowadays, they give you an assignment and they say 350 words. How can you give anything about anybody in 350 words? I'd rather write an Instagram post in 350 words than give it to a publisher. And all publishers also put too many fences around the author. So many pages say, they don't want to go ahead. Because they say it becomes, I think they have their own mathematics about it. Beyond 250 pages, the book doesn't work, then the pricing goes wrong, the marketing goes into a problem. So these are the pros and cons. But why I said about the engineering is that when I was doing the translation of Prime Minister's poems from Gujarati into English, the first book, Letters to Mother, which Harper Collins published it, I was not confident that I would be able to do it because I've not studied Gujarati. But like a good journalist, it was COVID time. I said, I'll read the book, and I'll just make a first draft of it, irrespective of how good, bad, or indifferent it is. So, as a good journalist, I finished the deadline within a week or 10 days. I finished the first draft of it, of a very literal translation. And then I started sculpting and sculpting and sculpting and making it seem like I owned it, to bring out the essence of the Prime Minister's words and thought. So I think in everything the word engineering comes about.
Great. Thank you. Okay, I'll just take a short pause here. For those of us who are on the YouTube or who are watching us on Facebook, do send in your questions on the email celebrate@valleyofwords.org, or you can call up at 9868 504041. You can send in your questions. We already got 2 or 3 questions, and we'll be talking about those questions in the next 10-15 minutes. May I request you, ma'am, to tell us about your wonderful book? Just as he's talked about villains, you've written a masterpiece called Mother, Maiden, Mistress, Women in the Hindi Cinema. So would you like to tell us something about this book, so that, for those of us who've not yet read it, we could, get an insight into your understanding of how Indian cinema or Bollywood has treated women?
So I was freshly coming out of my trilogy on Mr. Bachchan. I have done 3 books on Amitabh Bachchan. And I wanted to write about the women in cinema and such a long journey. And I was prepared with a lot of research and my work, but I was very exhausted and very drained. So I contacted 2 girls who I'd heard about, and I was told they were good researchers. And then we started meeting and chatting. And then I started enjoying their company so much that I had a revised proposal for them. I said, I am inviting you as co-authors. So it was the 3 of us, me, Jigna Kothari, and Supriya Madangiri. And we divided our responsibilities, but all the ideation was done together. All 3 of us in Mumbai lived in separate locations. Earlier, we used to meet in restaurants, and it was too noisy for us. Then my sister's home in Sion was a meeting point, and it was free of cost, chai, nashta, and a lot of love and warmth. And my sister was also contributing her memories to it. The whole process was very wonderful, and I genuinely think, even if it's my own book, like I feel Balaji does not have to be modest about his books. He can just say that, yes, I've done a lot of hard work, and I think my book is very good. I think Mother, Maiden, Mistress is a very, very good book. And I know of many actors, when they travel for participating in women panel discussions, they ask me from where can they order that copy. And I'm sure they read the stuff and they voice their opinion on that content, because in India, copyright is not meant for just me, the author. It is meant for everybody to copy and speak at any panel discussions.
So it's actually, sometimes people say copying is a right. So that's what copyright is. If copying is a right. So we've got a first question from a listener, Balaji.
Sure.
So I'll start that round also, because it's important to give. This is Balaji, as you have just one second. They say that as you mentioned, that cinema has mirrored villains to what used to happen in the 80s and 90s. So what is your opinion about the villains of this generation?
So, yeah, thank you for the question. Earlier, the villain was all black, right? If you look at Praan Sahab, whatever, उसमें हर बुराई उसमें है. He's not only a smuggler, he also sort of ill-treats his servants, and not only that, he's also a bad singer. He's bad in everything. And the good man is good in everything. But we know that life is not like that. We all have shades of gray, right? We all would jump the line. We all would jump the traffic signal if the cop was not looking. So we all tend to take liberties, and that is the truth. So if you look at villains, or let me call it the antagonists in the last 20 years, they have shades of gray. there's a backstory to them. They're also sort of allowed to give their point of view. For example, my favorite example is Dr. Asthana in Ankur Arora murder case, played by K.K. Menon. So what happens is he botches. I'm sorry. So he botches up a sort of a procedure in operation, and the kid dies, and then he's trying to cover up the whole goof up, and he gives a reason to it, saying that I'm the face of the hospital, right? So I have to protect the hospital's rights. Now, whether he's doing the right thing or not, he's at least talking about it. So it lends a shade of gray to the antagonism. I think that's been the change. That's a very visible change that you'll see in the antagonists in the last 20 years in Indian cinema.
Would you agree with entirely with him, or would you have a more nuanced approach to this, Bhavna?
My mind wanders to makers like Yash Chopra, who never made villain kind of movies, and he always said that in my movies, circumstances are the villain.
Yes.
For instance, like Kabhi Kabhi, you don't marry the woman you love, you marry somebody else. And in Silsila, also, you have to marry your brother's wife because she's pregnant. So it's the circumstances. But I think now the villains are villains. The villains are bad. The villains have bad moments. They have weak moments. And even the heroes have weak moments. So everything is more human today.
Okay.
Right.
That's a very...
But the hero is not completely white.
Yes.
Even the hero has
They're
shades
not
of...
one.
Yeah.
They all have their weak moments.
There's a question about Ajit and his identification with Loin. I mean, some of these villains develop their own characteristics. My name is Prem. Loin, Gabbar Singh. So, I mean, how did this happen? So, would you like to comment on the screen persona of these people and how they got away with it, or
I
etc.?
think Loin happened because sometimes no matter how educated, exposed you are, you always, all of us have certain words that we pronounce in a different way than what is the conventional way of doing it. And maybe Ajit Saab used to say instead of lion, loin. And maybe they tried to correct it and they could not. And then they let it just be. And then he became the lion for everybody. For example, I'm told that K.N. Singh, I used to love K.N. Singh because he had such a great persona. K.N. Singh Saab used to look very, very impressive in the hat and the overcoat. And the first time it worked, and then all the filmmakers started giving him the hat and the overcoat, and also a walking stick, And he had that sleepy eyes, kind of.
Eyes.
Yeah, droopy eyes, yes. And Prem, I think all actors are proactive. They like to add certain lines themselves, and then they discuss it with the director, and the director likes it, and then the line stays, and that becomes a slogan for them. For example, the first time I met Praan, he was shooting a Kawali scene with Prem. So he told me कि मैंने इसमें एक लाइन दी है कि मैं हूँ तेरा प्राण और तू है मेरा प्रेम. तो वो बहुत खुश थे वो लाइन से, और कोरियोग्राफर भी बहुत खुश था, और वो लोग कवाली गा रहे थे तो खुश थे सब लोग. तो ऐसे भी हो जाता है.
Yeah, in fact, Subhash Ghai, as Madam correctly said, Subhash Ghai tried to tell sir line kahiye. हाँ line वही तो मैं कह रहा हूँ. And Manoj Bajpayee, there's a line in Aks saying "Na koi marta hai, na koi marta hai, ye main nahi kehta, Gita mein likha hai," in the movie called Aks. That was contributed by Manoj Bajpayee himself in Aks, which is Rakesh Om Prakash Mehra's film. So yeah.
Okay, let's also talk about the pure evil, the bad women of Indian cinema. Let's talk about Bindhu and Lalita Pawar and all these others. So when is that book on the pure evil, the pure bad women in the Indian cinema going to come out?
Yeah. In fact, initially thought about having a separate chapter on women villains, but then I said no. In every category of villains, wherever there is a male, there is an equivalent women. There is a woman villain of the individual who's jealous, who's doing things out of jealousy, right? Or there is this, villain of the society, like she becomes a dacoit, just the way that, Mujhe Jeene Do mein Sunil Dutt becomes a dacoit. Similarly, in Sherni Daku, she becomes a dacoit. Like Daku Hasina mein Zinat Wan becomes a dacoit. Like Bandit Queen mein Phulan Devi Seema Biswas, she becomes a dacoit. So circumstances are very similar. Zamindar ki atyachar. यहाँ क्या होता है, सुनील दत्त becomes a डाकू because zamindar took away his lands. यहाँ पे होता है because maybe the zamindar molested her, raped her, and the police did nothing about it. So circumstances are very different, very similar rather, just that the context of male and female is different. So I have covered all the lady villains also in the same category. There are also those very smuggler type villains who are maybe assisting, or not just the mall, they're doing more than a mall. For example, in your Kamini in Kars, she's actually a sidekick of Premnath, Sir Judah. But then she's practically leading the whole show. She's the one who's actually sort of executing the whole show. Premnath goes. So that way I have covered everyone. I've also including the psychopaths and the serial killers like Priyanka Chopra in Saath Khoon Maaf, or Simi Grewal in, psychotic she plays in Chalte Chalte, or Kajol in Gupt. Right. So she was the first one to win a sort of a villain award, a women villain award for that in Filmfare. So that way I've covered a fair splattering of all the lady characters, because they form a very integral part of our rogues gallery of villains.
Great. There's a question for you, Bhavna ma'am. That question is that, are there any interesting anecdotes from Mr. Bachchan's book that you wish you had incorporated in your work, but you had to leave out because of constraints of space, which publishers, as Balaji also said, because of the publishers, number of words, number of pages? That's a direct question for you.
No, I think whatever I had to include was included. And I must say that it was a pleasure to do the books with him. And he does not interfere in the content at all. And unlike what others perhaps sometimes want to believe, or I'm often asked, is that does he tell you to edit things out and all? He does not. And because he's so disciplined, the scheduling becomes very easy, and your time schedules are very clearly marked out. And it now seems a very long ago, because the first book I did on him was in 1999, and it was a completely unplanned book. That was the time the computers had come to India, and Bachchan had just lifted the ban on the media. So he was talking, and I was one of the first journalists he spoke to. And within some months, I realized that I had so much material on him that just my art director put it in the form of a chapter and pictures, and it made a dummy. And that's how I reworked on the whole structure and became an accidental author, which was my debut book. In 2009, I published another book because a lot of his film information was left out, which could not go in the first book, which is answering your question. So I tied up with Oceans and we did a coffee table book with all his posters and backstories of all the books from 69 to 2009. And my 2011 book called Amitabh Lexicon is about all the words in the Oxford Dictionary. I've taken all the words in the Oxford Dictionary, almost all, and associated the word with a prop or an ambience in his film and given explanation of that scene where it was shot. For example, if we say arrow, then I say tufan and give the scene where he uses the arrow. Or if I say B, bottle, then it is Sharabi, and I talk about the scene where he uses the bottle. Or I say C, chain, and I say Zanjeer. It was a very, 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 very hard work book, but unfortunately, I think it did get that kind of exposure because probably the publisher was not that mainstream. what happens is when you come up with a very different idea, the top publishers don't want to touch it because they don't play with that kind of subjects. So you are forced to go to the middle round, and then it doesn't get that kind of an exposure. But I have no regrets. I'm extremely proud of that book, and even if I have to do it again myself, I will never be able to do it because there is a different energy at every decade you have. And as you get older, you say, forget about it, let Balaji Vittal write the books he wants to. I will just read it.
Great. We have only 10 minutes left and we have a series of questions that are happening.
Sure.
One is addressed to both of you. It says that who, according to you, is the Amitabh Bachchan of villains? Because Amitabh Bachchan is on a pedestal. Huh? So,
sorry? Who, according to you?
According to you, is the Amitabh Bachchan of villains? I mean, the best villain. I mean, in the sense that Amitabh Bachchan is the unparalleled pole star there. So, who? It's a question addressed to both of you.
I'm not an expert. Balaji can take the call.
Well, Amitabh Bachchan himself is a villain. If you look at films like
that's not an answer. Balaji, you're skirting
he plays
this.
a schizophrenic.
No. The question is addressed to you that amongst the villains that you have talked about, that I mean, of course, Amitabh Bachchan is also a villain, but if we were talk about pure villains, I mean, who is the Amitabh Bachchan of villains and why?
I would say Amjad Khan, the most obvious one. Okay. Amjad Khan, Amrish Puri for his.
All right, let's put it like this. So Amjad Khan, why Amjad Khan? And if it is, because of
Amjad Khan for the Gabbar Singh role.
For the Gabbar Singh role, okay. He is the most likable, the most, and then followed
most
by
remembered, most prominent, the biggest,
the biggest ever.
the mightiest.
The biggest ever. Okay.
Yeah.
Now the question is, the villains have always played second fiddle to the heroes, but their screen characters live on. Is this their acting brilliance, or what is it that you attribute this to? I mean, as we talked about Gabbar Singh, we talked about Loyan, we talked about Praan, Yari hai Iman, Mera Yar Meri Zindagi. So many of these things. So I mean, what is it that what is it in the character of a villain that lives on and on and on?
Madam, you can answer that. You want to take that?
I think it's an unfair question. I think that there are so many characters that live on. You can't classify them as a villain or as a comedian or as a hero. It's the character and the time factor when the movie was released, what society was going through, what impact it had on you as an audience. So it's too generic to be responded to.
Okay. Balaji, would you like to attempt?
Well, those days, the stories used to be written in favor. The hero was the author-backed character. So the villain had to lose and the hero had to win, right? So it appears as if the hero is sort of inferior or subordinated to the hero, or the villain is subordinate to the hero. But आजकल वैसा नहीं है. दोनों को बराबरी का मौका मिलता है, right? The hero also has gray shades and the villain also has certain shades of good. So it looks like it's an even battle between the two. May the best person win. That's what that's the change that has happened in the last 20 years.
So I think that's a very good insight. That's a very, very good insight into how the we another question that is coming up is about how would AI impact films? Because recently in Dehradun we had a conversation in which the whole discussion was on the impact of AI on the screenwriters and various things. So both of you are professionals who have worked very closely with this. So what would be your take on AI and the film industry, especially script writing, lyrics, and related things?
Madam, you first. You're the expert in writing.
I think the writers, whether it's screenplay or songs, are going to be the worst affected. And it's very, very heartbreaking, I really don't know how we are going to control it. I don't know how things can be restored, because technology is a monster, It comes with booms and many, many curses. And because, I am reading a lot about it, and there are some who are youngsters who show me that just say something and everything they'll give you in a second and a half. I'm surprised that freelance contributors, columnists are still surviving, because slowly people like Balaji and I will also be redundant.
Okay. Would you share the same skepticism?
See, when synthesizers came, there was also a similar threat saying, are the musicians going to be out of job? And some people like Kersey Lord assured them, saying that no, I'll use the Moog synthesizer only to enhance the music, not replace the musicians, right? So long as we control technology and use it to enhance our personal skill, I think we're okay. Whether it be generative AI or chat GPT or any of those things, it can never replace a human being, because ultimately it's a human who's going to sign off. So it depends on how quickly we get on top of this generative AI and chat GPT and control it. If you let it loose, it's going to control you. So better we take control and use it to enhance our skills. Yeah, it is a threat, but it is no more a threat than what synthesizers came in about 40 years back. We learned to use it, we learned to harness it and use it for improving the music.
Yes, because I think this sort of ideas that we come up with. I mean, the whole idea of writing a book on Sachin Dev Burman. Why should the AI,
Yeah,
want to do it?
because if
And
you look
there'll
at it,
be pure passion.
if you look at the growth of writing books, in the last 20 years has coincided with the growth of Google. So Google hasn't replaced books. Google has helped write more. So I would say that is the more encouraging side of it. But of course, I completely take Bhavna Madam's point as well.
Okay, friends, we'll have to close because all good things must come to an end. Before closing, before I thank the two very distinguished participants today, I'd like to thank Cello, I'd like to thank REC, NEFED, Uttarakhand Tourism, Garhwal Post, Fair Observer, and of course Technopack for providing us the support, Green Panel, Coal India Limited, and the ONGC and Incredible India for all the support that they've given to us, and a special word of thanks to the National Digital Library of India. And we hope to see you again in one of our future sessions. May you write more books, may you have more thoughts, and let's celebrate the word. Let's celebrate Bollywood. Let's celebrate our nation. Let's celebrate Hindustan. Let's celebrate Bharat. Thank you, friends. It's a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much. It's indeed been a
Thank you.
pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.